Hello, I am Mike, narrator of the Haunting Tales. Today's story about the Cherokee Sacred Cave's disturbing secret, what they hid that shocked everyone. The humid air clung to James Whitaker's skin as he dismounted his horse, the sound of hooves stirring the dry leaves of the Cherokee foothills. It was June of 1839, and the sun had begun its slow descent behind the ridges, casting the valley in hues of orange and violet. James, a plantation owner from nearby Georgia, had heard whispers from locals about caves hidden deep within the forests, caves that even the Cherokee spoke of only in hushed tones. Curiosity gnawed at him, but there was something almost reverent, almost fearful, about the way the villagers avoided the subject. He adjusted his coat, the weight of his father's expectations pressing on him, and led his horse along a narrow, winding trail that would take him to the rumored site. The forest grew denser with every step, the air cooler as shadows stretched between the gnarled trees. Birds, unsettled by his intrusion, flitted away into the dark canopy, leaving an eerie silence that seemed almost deliberate. James stopped at a clearing, catching sight of the cave's entrance. Moss-covered rocks formed an archway like a natural cathedral, and a soft breeze carried an inexplicable scent, earthy, metallic, and strangely sweet. The Cherokee had told him of spirits guarding the place, but he dismissed it as superstition. Still, a shiver traced his spine. A sudden rustle in the underbrush made him freeze. From the shadows emerged an elderly Cherokee woman, her face lined with centuries of stories. "You do not belong here," she said softly, yet her eyes held a sharpness that pierced through the twilight. James straightened, bowing his head in respect, though curiosity burned hotter than caution. "I mean no harm. I've only come to see what lies within," he replied, his voice betraying both awe and nervousness. The woman's gaze softened, yet the warning lingered. What is hidden inside is not for the eyes of outsiders. Once seen, it changes the soul. James hesitated, but the lure of the unknown was irresistible. With a deep breath, he stepped past the mossy threshold, the air growing cooler and damper as darkness enveloped him. Stalactites dripped rhythmically, the echo of water creating a haunting symphony. His torch flickered, casting jagged shadows across ancient carvings etched into the stone walls, symbols that seemed to pulse with an almost lifelike energy. And then he saw it. A low, stone altar, covered in artifacts that no one outside the Cherokee would understand. Bones, carefully arranged, and small, glimmering objects whose purpose James could only guess at. A sound behind him, a whispered chant, soft and mournful, made his blood run cold. He turned, and in the dim torchlight, he glimpsed figures retreating deeper into the cave, their faces hidden, yet their presence undeniable. A wave of dread washed over him. The stories were true. The caves were sacred, yes, but also protective. And whatever secret lay buried here had been preserved for generations, hidden from the eyes of men like him. James knew, in that instant, that uncovering this secret would not be a simple curiosity. It would test every belief he held and perhaps force him to reckon with consequences far beyond the walls of his plantation. Footsteps echoed ahead. The unknown awaited. James's heart pounded as he followed the winding passage deeper into the cave, each step echoing against the cold stone walls. The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and something faintly metallic, like iron, yet sweeter, almost like burnt honey. His torchlight flickered against the walls, revealing more of the strange carvings, spirals intertwined with symbols he couldn't begin to decipher, faces that seemed carved not just in stone, but in shadow, as if watching him. He stopped suddenly, hearing a soft, almost imperceptible chant. It wasn't words he recognized, but the cadence carried weight, authority, and an age-old rhythm that made him swallow hard. The shadows ahead shifted, and figures cloaked in dark fabric appeared, moving with deliberate silence. He felt both terrified and mesmerized, caught between fear of intrusion and an irresistible need to know what lay ahead. "Who are you?" he whispered, barely audible over the dripping of water. The figures did not answer. One paused and turned slightly, revealing a glimpse of an elderly man's face, lined and solemn. His eyes were piercing, and James felt uncomfortably that he was being measured, judged. A cold breeze whispered past him, carrying a faint scent of burning sage. He realized then that he had crossed into a sacred domain, a space where outsiders were not welcome. Yet curiosity held him fast. Step by cautious step, he followed the figures deeper. The passage opened into a wide chamber, the ceiling high and dark, adorned with stalactites that dripped slowly onto the stone floor. At the center was a circle of stones, blackened with age, around which the figures stood in silence. Upon closer inspection, James saw what had drawn him here. The cave was not simply a hideout or a shrine. It was a sanctuary of memory, an archive of stories written in objects, bones, and carvings. A figure in the seat. Enter turned to him, raising a hand slowly. The gesture was not threatening but commanding. "You must choose carefully," the figure intoned. "Knowledge here comes at a price. What you take with your eyes, you carry with your soul." James felt a chill run through him. Every instinct screamed to turn back, but he could not. The stories of the Cherokee, whispered in hushed tones in the valley below, spoke of a secret powerful enough to shake men to their core. And now he was standing at the threshold, not merely as an observer, but as a participant. He took a step closer, and the circle of figures parted slightly, revealing what lay beyond. A smaller chamber, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. Inside, artifacts of gold, silver, and carved wood rested alongside bundles wrapped in cloth, their purpose and history unknown. The walls here were etched with faces, some sorrowful, some triumphant, each telling a story of life, loss, and defiance. James realized the truth. This cave was more than sacred. It was alive, holding not just objects but the spirits of ancestors, the memory of generations, and secrets that could unsettle the world above. And now, having crossed the threshold, he could never leave untouched by what he was about to see. A soft murmur rose behind him, like voices carried on the wind. Something was moving deeper still, something that wanted him to follow. James hesitated at the entrance of the glowing chamber, the air heavy with anticipation. Every instinct in his body screamed both awe and fear. The flickering torchlight danced over the artifacts inside, revealing carved wooden figures, delicate bundles wrapped in cloth, and objects glinting faintly like sunlight trapped in metal. The silence was profound, almost sacred, broken only by the soft murmuring of the figures behind him. One of them, an older man with eyes like polished obsidian, stepped forward. "You have come far," he said. His voice was steady, yet it carried the weight of centuries. "Few outsiders are permitted here, and fewer still are ready for what they will see." James swallowed hard. I only wish to understand. I've heard the stories. I needed to see for myself." The elder's gaze softened, though the caution never left it. "Then see, but remember, the truth is heavy. Not all knowledge brings peace." He gestured toward a low stone altar at the center of the chamber. On it rested a small, ornate box made of polished cedar, its surface etched with intricate symbols. James stepped closer, his fingers trembling. He could sense that whatever lay inside this box was the heart of the cave's secret. When he lifted the lid, the chamber seemed to exhale. Inside were small bundles of meticulously preserved objects, carved animal bones, seeds, and miniature tools. But what caught James's attention was a collection of papers, thin strips of bark inscribed with symbols and images he did not recognize. They were carefully folded, almost reverently, and radiated an energy he could not explain. One of the cloaked figures spoke softly from the shadows. "These are records of our people. The history you will never read in books. They tell of survival, of resistance, of wisdom passed through generations. And yet they are hidden because outsiders do not understand." James's curiosity mingled with guilt. He had expected treasure or riches, perhaps some mysterious ritual objects. What he found instead was living memory, preserved with care and devotion. The weight of it pressed on him, and he realized that this knowledge was not meant for exploitation. To misinterpret it, to expose it recklessly, would be a violation, a theft of identity and spirit. Suddenly, a rustling behind him startled him. A small figure emerged from the shadows. A young Cherokee boy, eyes wide, clutching a bundle to his chest. He looked at James with a mixture of fear and defiance. "The cave chooses who can see," the elder said, "and it chooses who cannot leave unchanged." James felt a chill creep along his spine. He understood now that he had entered a realm where his own desires, greed, curiosity, even pride, could be challenged, reshaped, or condemned. The first secret of the cave had revealed itself. It was not wealth or ritual alone, but something far deeper, far more unsettling. Knowledge here came at a cost. And as he looked around the chamber, at the careful arrangements, the whispers of the past seemed to rise, threading through the shadows, reaching for him. He realized he was no longer just a visitor. He was part of the cave's story now, whether he wanted to be or not. From the corners of the chamber he heard it again, a soft, sorrowful chant, beckoning him deeper, toward a secret even more unimaginable. The young boy retreated quietly into the shadows, leaving James alone with the elder and the strange, glowing artifacts. The air in the chamber seemed to thicken, as if the cave itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what he would do next. James's eyes lingered on the bundles of preserved objects, the carved bones, and the thin strips of bark inscribed with symbols he could not read. Each item seemed to vibrate faintly under his gaze, carrying a history older than anything he had imagined. The elder gestured toward a narrow passage that led deeper into the heart of the cave. "Few have walked here," he said, his voice solemn, "and fewer still have understood what they witnessed. Come, if you dare." James hesitated. Every instinct warned him of danger, yet a deeper curiosity pulled him forward. The torchlight flickered as he followed the elder down the twisting passage, the walls narrowing and the shadows stretching ominously. A faint chanting rose from somewhere deeper, a melody both mournful and commanding. It seemed to weave around him, filling the chamber with an almost tangible energy. Finally, they arrived at a wide, circular cavern, unlike any part of the cave James had seen before. In the center lay a stone platform etched with intricate symbols and streaked with dark stains that reflected the dim torchlight. Around it, figures knelt, shrouded in ceremonial garb, their heads bowed in reverence. Candles carved from beeswax flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. James's stomach tightened. The scene was unlike any ritual he had imagined. The elder spoke softly, almost reverently. "This is the ceremony of remembrance. Every object in the cave is part of it. Every action, every chant, preserves the memory of those who came before." James watched in stunned silence as the participants opened small bundles, carefully arranging their contents. Bones carved stones, feathers, around the platform. The items were placed with precision, forming patterns that seemed to tell stories. And then he noticed it, a delicate feather, tied with thread, lying atop a bundle of bark. The elder's eyes met his. "This is not a game, outsider," the elder said. "To witness this is to share in the responsibility of memory. The cave chooses who may enter and who may carry its secrets." A chill ran through James. He had come expecting curiosity, perhaps discovery, but not this. A moral weight that pressed on him like a physical force. He realized that the sacred objects were not merely symbolic. They carried the essence of generations, of life and loss, and perhaps even of defiance against forces far greater than any man could control. As the chanting rose, James's thoughts raced. Could he ever truly understand what he had seen? And more importantly, if he left the cave, what would he carry with him? And what might be lost if he failed to respect the cave's demands? The elder turned toward him, the shadows casting his face in sharp relief. "There is more to see," he said, his voice low but firm, "and some truths are more dangerous than you can imagine." The torchlight flickered, and the shadows seemed to lean closer, as though the cave itself was waiting for James to take the next step. Beyond the circle of kneeling figures lay a hidden passage, darker than any path he had taken so far, calling him forward with promises of secrets even the plantation owners could never have dreamed. James's heart raced as he followed the elder through the narrower passage beyond the ceremonial chamber. The walls pressed closer, slick with moisture, and the air carried a pungent, earthy aroma. Each step echoed like a heartbeat in the tight darkness. The soft chant from the previous chamber faded, replaced by an almost imperceptible hum, vibrating through the stone floor beneath his boots. Finally, the passage opened into a hidden alcove, unlike anything James had seen. The glow of torchlight reflected off objects arranged with meticulous care. Small carved boxes, clay figures, and bundles of preserved items. But at the center lay something that made his breath catch. It was a shallow pit, lined with cloth, holding dozens of tiny, intricately carved effigies, each resembling a human form. They were eerily lifelike, some showing joy, others sorrow, yet all frozen in time with uncanny precision. The elder's voice broke the silence. "These are the bearers of memory," he explained, gesturing toward the pit. "Each effigy holds a story, a lesson, a warning. They are the witnesses of what the world often ignores, the pain, the survival, and the resistance of our people." James bent closer, squinting in the dim light. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, but he felt an unsettling chill. The figures seemed almost to watch him, their tiny eyes glinting with a depth that no mere carving could achieve. A strange sensation prickled at the back of his neck, as though the ancestors themselves were observing, judging. "Why? Why hide this?" James asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why not show it to the world?" The elder's gaze was piercing. "The world is not ready. Those who see without understanding often destroy what they touch. This cave is a safeguard, a place where the memory of our people can survive, untouched by greed, ignorance, or cruelty." James felt the weight of his own intentions pressing against him. He had entered the cave seeking knowledge, perhaps treasure, maybe even fame. Yet now he realized that what he had uncovered was neither trivial nor safe. To expose this would be to desecrate it. To ignore it would be to betray the responsibility he had unwittingly assumed. He reached out tentatively to one of the effigies, then hesitated, remembering the elder's words. The room seemed to hum louder, as if the cave itself were alive, urging caution. Each effigy held a secret, a life, a choice, a memory. And James understood that some truths were dangerous, not because of what they revealed, but because of what they demanded from those who witnessed them. A sudden movement in the shadows made him jump. The young boy from earlier appeared again, placing a bundle on the edge of the pit. "The cave watches," the elder said quietly, "and now it watches you." James swallowed hard, feeling the cave's presence pressing into him. He had crossed a threshold that could not be undone. The hidden legacy of the Cherokee, the truths their ancestors fought to preserve, now rested partially in his hands, and he knew that his next choice could alter not just his life, but the balance between the world above and the sacred depths below. The hum of the cave deepened, almost a whisper of warning. Some secrets were meant to remain buried. But James, drawn by an insatiable curiosity, could not turn away. James stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the pit of effigies, the weight of the cave pressing down on him like a living presence. The elder's words echoed in his mind. "The cave watches, and now it watches you." He realized that he was no longer an observer. He had stepped across an invisible threshold, one that blurred the line between witness and participant. Every shadow seemed to flicker with intent, every carved symbol on the walls whispering caution. The young boy, still clutching his bundle, stepped closer to James. His wide eyes were both fearful and piercing, as though he could see straight into James's conscience. "Do you understand?" the boy asked softly. "The cave remembers who respects it, and who does not." James swallowed hard, guilt twisting his stomach. He had come seeking answers, but now he questioned whether he had any right to be here at all. His father's voice, proud and insistent, seemed distant and hollow compared to the gravity surrounding him. The cave demanded more than curiosity. It demanded humility, reverence, and perhaps even sacrifice. The elder stepped forward, motioning for James to follow. "Come," he said. "You have seen the first layer of truth. There is more, but the path ahead tests the heart, not the eyes." James's torch flickered, as they moved deeper into the alcove. The passage narrowed sharply, forcing him to squeeze between damp rock walls. The air grew cooler, almost biting, and he shivered despite the heat of his own fear. From somewhere below, a low hum began to rise, resonating through the stone, vibrating in his chest like the echo of a distant drum. Finally, they emerged into another chamber, larger and darker than any before. The walls were covered with carvings of people, men, women, children, in scenes of struggle, of escape, of defiance. Some were alone, some were together, forming intricate stories that Jameson could feel rather than read. At the center of this chamber lay another altar, larger and more imposing than the first. The elder's voice was steady, almost ceremonial. "This is the heart of judgment. Those who enter must confront not only the history of our people, but the weight of their own choices. You are here not by chance, but because the cave has deemed you capable, or perhaps in need, of understanding." James felt the torch slip slightly in his trembling hand. He was unprepared for the intensity of the carvings. Each figure seemed alive in some strange, almost supernatural way. He realized that the cave was not merely preserving memory. It was reflecting the essence of those who entered. It tested intentions, motives, and the strength of character. A whisper seemed to circle him, not from any figure or person, but from the stone itself. Do you honor or exploit? Do you learn or destroy? James clenched his jaw, understanding that this was no longer a story about curiosity or discovery. Every step forward carried moral weight. Every glance, every action, every thought would be judged by forces older than the plantations, older than the land he knew. The cave had set the rules, and the consequences of misjudgment could extend far beyond him. In the dim glow of the altar, the elder motioned toward a small door carved into the rock, partially hidden by shadows. "The next secret waits," he said, "and it will not forgive hesitation." James took a deep breath, steeling himself. He had crossed into a world where observation alone was insufficient. Now he would be tested, body, mind, and soul. James hesitated before the hidden door the elder had revealed, his hand hovering over the cold, rough stone. Beyond it lay the next chamber, one the elder had warned would test him in ways he could not yet comprehend. The torch in his hand flickered, shadows leaping across the walls as if alive, and he felt the cave's weight pressing down on him like a silent judge. The elder placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "This chamber," he said softly, "holds knowledge that has been preserved from outsiders for centuries. Those who enter are not only witnesses, they are responsible for what they learn." James nodded, swallowing his fear. He had come seeking secrets, yes, but he had not anticipated the moral gravity that now enveloped him. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The air was cooler here, almost electric, tinged with a metallic scent that made his stomach twist. The chamber was small but densely packed. Shelves carved directly from the stone walls held scrolls of dried bark, jars containing unidentifiable powders and roots, and bundles tied in intricate knots. At the center lay a shallow basin filled with water so dark it seemed to absorb the torchlight. Reflected in its surface were images of people, men, women, and children, their faces twisting in expressions of pain, sorrow, and defiance. James leaned closer, feeling the air thicken around him. The elder whispered, "This water shows truths that cannot be spoken aloud. It reveals the choices people have made and the consequences that follow. Not all who see it can bear what is reflected." James's reflection appeared in the basin, wavering with the ripples of his torchlight. But soon the water darkened, and he saw not his own face, but visions of his plantation, his family, overseers, and the lives of those bound to him. Faces of enslaved workers appeared, their eyes silently accusing, their burdens made visible in the shimmering reflections. James recoiled. He had never faced the reality of what his family's wealth demanded. The cave was forcing him to see, to confront, a truth he had long avoided. "The cave shows what the world hides," the elder murmured, "and what is hidden shapes the present." To look away is to remain blind. To act without understanding is to commit folly. James struggled to maintain his composure. The visions shifted, showing acts of cruelty, subtle betrayals, moments of resistance, and fleeting kindnesses he had never known existed among the people in his life. Each image pierced him, challenging the very identity he had carried proudly. He realized that the cave's secret was not just history, it was judgment, a moral reckoning, and a call to responsibility. He felt the young boy's presence beside him and glanced down. The boy's eyes were steady, unwavering, filled with a mixture of caution and expectation. "Do you see it?" he asked softly. "Do you understand?" James swallowed, feeling the weight of centuries pressing into his chest. He could no longer separate himself from the stories before him. The chamber of forbidden knowledge demanded acknowledgement, acceptance, and perhaps transformation. Every choice he had made, every step he had taken, had led him here. And now the cave required him to face the consequences of understanding what had been hidden. A soft ripple passed over the water, and the chamber seemed to exhale. Somewhere deeper, beyond the walls, a low hum began to rise again, beckoning him toward the next revelation, the next trial, the next truth the cave had preserved through centuries of silence. James's hands trembled as he stepped deeper into the chamber, the echoes of the dark reflective water still resonating in his mind. The elder led him to a wider space beyond, where the ceiling arched high and the walls were etched with intricate depictions of ceremonies spanning generations. The carvings told stories of survival, defiance, and sacred observances that outsiders were never meant to witness. The air smelled faintly of smoke and earth, grounding him in the reality of the moment, yet the chamber itself seemed alive, almost breathing. In the center, a circle of stones formed a deliberate pattern. Around it lay bundles of herbs, feathers, and small carved figures. The elder motioned for James to kneel at the edge. "This is the ritual of remembrance," he said. "It honors those who came before and preserves the balance between the seen and unseen. Few outsiders have ever been allowed to witness it, and fewer have understood its purpose." James studied the ritual objects carefully. At first glance, they seemed simple, small bundles, carved stones, traces of dried flowers. Yet there was an unmistakable precision to their arrangement, a symmetry that spoke of meaning far beyond casual decoration. "What happens here?" he asked, his voice almost lost in the cavernous space. The elder's gaze was unwavering. "Here, we acknowledge the lives that built us, the struggles that sustained us, and the choices that shaped the path forward. The ritual is not for spectacle. It is not for power. It is for truth." As James watched, a group of figures entered silently from the shadows, their movements deliberate, reverent. Each participant carried a small object, a token, a memory, an offering, which they placed carefully in the circle. One placed a carved bone, another a bundle of seeds, a third a feather. James realized that every action was imbued with intent. Every placement was an acknowledgement of a life, a story, a truth too fragile to survive in ordinary memory. A sudden chill swept through the chamber as the chanting began, soft at first, then rising in a rhythmic cadence. The words were unfamiliar, yet their meaning resonated deeply. They were songs of remembrance, of warning, of gratitude, carried across centuries. James felt a lump form in his throat, as though the cave itself was speaking directly to him. He understood then that this ritual, so carefully preserved, was the source of the cave's power. It was not merely the artifacts, the carvings, or the effigies. It was the act of honoring memory, of acknowledging pain, triumph, and survival in a way that refused to let it be erased. James's eyes were drawn to a small bundle placed deliberately at the center of the circle. The elder leaned closer, whispering, "This represents the lives that were hidden from history, those erased by outsiders' greed and ignorance. To see it is to witness their truth." A shiver ran down James's spine. The cave's secrets were more profound than he had imagined. They were not simply curiosities to be catalogued or displayed. They demanded respect, understanding, and a recognition that some truths could shock, unsettle, and transform even the most powerful outsiders. The chanting intensified, echoing against the stone walls, carrying with it a palpable sense of history and consequence. James felt the cave's presence like a living thing, pressing him to absorb, reflect, and reckon with what he had uncovered. And in that moment, he realized that the next secret, the one lying beyond this chamber, would challenge him more than he could imagine. The rhythmic chant still echoed through the chamber as James followed the elder toward a narrow, shadowed corridor that led deeper into the heart of the cave. The air grew colder, damp seeping into his clothes, carrying with it a metallic tang that made his stomach twist. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the cave itself were testing his resolve. Ahead, a faint glow illuminated another alcove, smaller and more confined than the previous chambers, yet suffused with an energy that made the hairs on James's arms stand on end. The elder motioned for him to kneel before a low stone platform. Upon it lay a series of objects arranged with meticulous care: polished stones, carved masks, and bundles wrapped in soft cloth. But it was the centerpiece that held his attention, a small obsidian mirror, black as midnight, reflecting nothing but the dim torchlight. "The Guardian's warning," the elder whispered, his eyes grave. "This mirror does not show the past or the present. It reflects intentions, the truth hidden in the heart. Those who look must see themselves as they truly are, or be undone by what they hide." James swallowed hard, staring at the obsidian surface. He had expected discoveries of history, artifacts, and secrets of survival. He had not expected to confront his own conscience so directly. The reflection shimmered, and for a moment he saw only himself, a plantation owner, a man shaped by privilege and fear, carrying the weight of choices made for profit, power, and pride. Then the image shifted. Faces of the enslaved people on his family's land appeared, not as caricatures or shadows, but in vivid, haunting clarity. Their eyes were accusing, sorrowful, yet strangely patient. James felt a pang of guilt so sharp it took his breath away. He had come seeking knowledge, but the cave forced him to confront the consequences of actions he had only observed from a distance. "The cave spares no one," the elder continued. "It preserves what the world ignores. You are here not only to witness but to understand, to face the truth others hide from themselves. Do you see what your presence demands?" James's hands trembled as he reached for the obsidian mirror. For a moment, he considered turning away, but the cave seemed to pulse around him, alive with an expectation that could not be ignored. As he peered deeper, the reflections morphed further, showing scenes of resistance, small acts of courage, and hidden alliances that he had never considered. The cave was teaching him that history was not merely a record of events, but a living web of choices, courage, and consequences. The young boy appeared at his side, silent and watchful. "The mirror does not lie," he said softly. "It reveals what you carry inside, and what you carry shapes what comes next." James's chest tightened. The cave had revealed its warning, but the true test lay ahead. He understood now that the secrets preserved here were far more than stories. They were lessons, responsibilities, and trials that demanded humility and courage. And as the shadows danced across the obsidian surface, he realized that to proceed further meant facing truths that could shatter not just his perceptions, but the world he thought he knew. A faint ripple ran through the stone floor, like the echo of a heartbeat. Beyond the alcove, a narrow passage beckoned him, promising revelations that no outsider had ever fully witnessed, and consequences that could change him forever. James stepped cautiously down the narrow passage, the obsidian mirror's haunting images still vivid in his mind. The air grew colder, almost biting, carrying a faint scent of earth and smoke, mingled with something metallic that made his stomach tighten. Each step echoed unnaturally in the confined space, as though the cave itself were amplifying his heartbeat. Ahead, a soft glow emanated from a cavern carved directly into the stone. The elder paused, his face shadowed and solemn. "You have seen reflection, judgment, and remembrance," he said. "Now you will hear what the cave has hidden from the world." James followed him into the chamber, and the glow became clearer. The walls were lined with niches, each holding a small bundle of reeds, leather, and bone. As he approached, he realized the bundles were not mere artifacts. They were vessels of memory, containers of voices preserved over generations. When the elder motioned toward them, James could hear it. Faint, whispering voices, rising and falling like the wind through trees, carrying stories too long buried. "These are the voices of those who lived, who struggled, who resisted," the elder explained. "Not all were honored in the world outside. Some were erased, their stories silenced. Here, they speak." James knelt, trying to listen closely. The whispers became clearer, telling fragments of lives: a mother protecting her child from captors, a young warrior hiding in the forest, the grief of a family torn apart. Each story struck him with a force that no history book could convey. The pain, courage, and resilience of the people were palpable, as though the cave had captured their very souls. He glanced at the young boy, who watched silently, understanding the weight of what James was experiencing. "Do you hear them?" the boy asked softly. "They speak truth that no outsider should ever take lightly." Mrs. throat tightened. These voices were more than history. They were living memory, preserved in a sacred, meticulous way that demanded respect and silence. He realized that the plantation owners who had ruled the land above would have been horrified, not at treasure or ritual, but at the very humanity preserved here, truths they had chosen to ignore or erase. The elder stepped closer to James. "The cave's secrets are not for amusement, nor for greed. To hear these voices is to carry responsibility. You will leave changed, whether you wish it or not." James felt a profound sense of humility wash over him. He had entered the caves seeking curiosity, perhaps even adventure. Instead, he had been forced to witness centuries of struggle, survival, and defiance. The cave demanded not just understanding, but a reckoning, a confrontation with history, morality, and conscience that no outsider could escape. A low chant began to rise from the shadows, soft but insistent. The voices of the buried, intertwined with the cave's own murmur, seemed to guide him toward another chamber, another revelation that promised to shake him further. James understood the truth. The cave's secrets were layered, each deeper than the last, each demanding more courage than the one before. And somewhere beyond the glow, a presence waited, patient, watchful, and unyielding, ready to reveal the next even more shocking secret. James moved slowly through the dimly lit passage beyond the chamber of voices, his mind still heavy with the whispered stories he had just heard. The cave seemed to pulse around him, each step amplifying the sense that he was being drawn into something far larger than himself. The elder walked beside him in silence, his presence steady and commanding, guiding James through the labyrinthine tunnels that twisted like the veins of the earth. They arrived at another chamber, its entrance partially concealed by a jagged rock formation. As James entered, he immediately sensed a shift. The air here was warmer, tinged with the faint scent of smoke and dust, carrying a weight of history that pressed upon him. The walls were lined with etched depictions of people in the world above, settlers, plantation owners, soldiers, and others. Yet the carvings told stories James had never seen in books: the oppression, the resilience, the acts of kindness hidden in shadows. At the center lay a large, flat stone tablet engraved with intricate symbols and scenes. The elder gestured for James to kneel before it. "This is the world above," he said. "It is not the world you think you know. History has been written by those in power, but the truth, the full truth, is preserved here beneath the surface. The cave keeps it safe." James leaned forward, examining the carvings. He saw families torn apart, secret alliances forged, and subtle acts of rebellion against oppression. His stomach tightened. The cave was forcing him to confront what the plantation owners had worked so hard to conceal: the humanity, dignity, and courage of those they had sought to control. He had always viewed the world above as natural, even rightful. Now, standing here, he felt a gnawing sense of guilt, shame, and responsibility. A sudden movement at the edge of the chamber made him start. The young boy stepped forward, placing a bundle onto the stone tablet. He looked up at James with unwavering eyes. "To see is not enough," the boy said softly. You must understand, and understanding carries a burden. James realized the truth in the boy's words. The cave's secrets were not merely historical curiosities. They were a mirror, reflecting not only the past, but the consequences of choices, the unseen threads of human action, and the moral obligations of those who had benefited from injustice. To leave the cave unchanged would be to ignore the truth that had been hidden for centuries. The elder's voice cut through the heavy silence. This chamber reveals the balance between what is done in the light and what is hidden in darkness. You have seen the memories of the cave, the voices of the buried, and the judgments of the ancestors. Now you see the world above, the stage upon which these stories unfolded. Do you understand your role? James's chest tightened. He could not deny it. His presence in the cave was no accident. The path had brought him here to witness, to learn, and to reckon with the hidden truths of a society that had long justified cruelty and ignored resistance. The cave had tested him, and now the final layers of its secrets awaited, revelations that could shatter his perception of himself and the world he thought he controlled. In the dim light, the elder pointed toward a hidden passage, partially obscured behind the tablet. A faint glow emanated from within. "The final truth awaits," he said, "and it will demand more than courage. It will demand honesty with yourself." James swallowed hard. Whatever lay ahead, he knew the cave had already changed him. There was no turning back.
Did you know? In the 1830s, as Cherokee people were being forcibly removed from their lands during the Trail of Tears, U.S. soldiers and settlers intentionally destroyed or confiscated Cherokee ceremonial sites and sacred objects to prevent cultural continuity. Because of this, Cherokee elders secretly hid sacred items, wampum records, ceremonial tools, and spiritual knowledge in remote locations, including caves and underground shelters, to stop them from being seized or erased. This is a documented survival strategy, not legend, and even more shocking, many of these hidden sites were never recovered after removal. Entire pieces of Cherokee history remain lost underground to this day, deliberately hidden so colonial forces could never rewrite or possess them. The goal was simple. If we cannot stay on our land, our memory will.
James stepped cautiously toward the faint glow emanating from the hidden passage beyond the tablet. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the cave itself were pressing on him, demanding that he absorb everything he had already seen and prepare for what was coming. The whispers from the chamber of voices still echoed in his mind, mingling with the images of the world above, creating a weight that made his chest tighten. The passage opened into a wide cavern, illuminated by an ethereal light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Shadows danced across carved faces and intricate patterns, giving the impression that the chamber was alive. At the center lay a stone dais draped in cloth, atop which rested a collection of objects unlike any James had seen before: ceremonial masks, charred wood, bundles of preserved herbs, and a small, delicate box that pulsed faintly with a strange energy. The elder gestured toward the dais. "This is the heart of the cave's truth," he said. "It is the secret that has been guarded above all else. Many have come seeking knowledge, but few are ready to bear it. It is not merely history. It is revelation." James approached slowly, his eyes locked on the small box. His hand trembled as he reached for it. The moment he lifted the lid, a cold gust of air swept through the chamber, and the shadows seemed to ripple like liquid. Inside were papers, symbols, and tiny figurines depicting moments of betrayal, injustice, and hidden acts of courage. But the most striking were the records of exploitation, meticulously detailed accounts of the plantation owners' abuses, the theft of land, and the erasure of Cherokee lives and culture. James staggered back, his heart hammering. He had always seen himself as a man of status and reason, yet here lay undeniable evidence of cruelty and greed, actions that his family had long ignored or styfied. He realized with a sickening clarity that the world he had known was built on the suffering of others, and that the cave's guardians had preserved this truth for generations, waiting for someone like him to confront it. The young boy stepped forward, holding a small bundle. "This is why the cave exists," he said softly. "Not to punish, but to show the truth. Those who see it must carry it carefully. The world above would never admit these stories, but here, they cannot be erased." James's hands shook as he set the box back onto the dais. Every instinct told him to leave, to forget, to return to the comfort of ignorance. Yet he knew the cave would not allow it. The revelations pressed upon him like living entities, each demanding acknowledgement, responsibility, and perhaps even change. The elder's voice, calm but resolute, cut through the tension. "You have seen what many cannot. You have witnessed the consequences of blindness and cruelty, of exploitation and silence. What you do with this knowledge will determine whether the cave's trust in you is justified." James swallowed hard, feeling the enormity of the cave's expectations. He understood now that he could never return to the plantation unchanged. The secrets he had uncovered, the voices, the ceremonies, the moral truths, would follow him, demanding that he reckon with the world above and the choices he would make. From the shadows, a soft murmur rose, almost a chant, almost a sigh, a reminder that the cave was patient, eternal, and unyielding. And yet, for the first time, James felt the weight of hope, that perhaps understanding could lead to something more than shame, that acknowledgement could be the first step toward justice. James stood in the center of the cavern, the small glowing box still on the stone dais before him. The chill of the cave seeped into his bones, but it was nothing compared to the weight pressing on his conscience. He had seen voices silenced, histories erased, and rituals performed to honor the unseen. Now, the ultimate question hung in the air. What would he do with this knowledge? The elder stepped closer, eyes grave but steady. "The cave does not merely preserve, it entrusts. Those who witness its secrets are given a responsibility. You must choose, to keep, to protect, or to reveal. Each path has consequences, for yourself and for the world above." James's mind raced. To reveal the secrets could bring reckoning, perhaps even justice to the plantation lands above, but it could also incite anger, misunderstanding, or destruction. To keep them hidden meant preserving the safety of the cave, yet it would feel like betraying the truth he had just seen. And to protect them, to carry them quietly, would demand vigilance, courage, and integrity he had never tested. He glanced at the young boy, whose gaze seemed to pierce straight into him. "The cave trusts those who can carry its weight," the boy said softly. "But it also tests them. Choose wisely, for what you decide will echo long after you leave." James dropped to his knees, letting the torchlight flicker across the carvings on the walls. He saw faces, of ancestors, of the enslaved, of those who had suffered and survived. They were not just history, they were living memory, demanding acknowledgement. He felt a wave of shame for the world he had come from, a world that ignored these voices and their pain. The elder extended a hand toward the box. "Touch it," he said. "Feel what it carries. Understand what is entrusted to you before choosing. The cave will accept no half measures." James placed his trembling hands on the box. A warmth pulsed through him, a sensation that was more spiritual than physical. Images flashed before his eyes. Ceremonies, voices, sacrifices, acts of courage and resistance. The weight of generations pressed on him, almost unbearable, yet illuminating a path forward. He realized then that there was no safe or easy choice. Every decision would alter the course of not only his own life, but the legacy of those the cave protected. He could feel the cave itself watching, patient but insistent, awaiting a decision that would test his morality, humility, and courage. Finally, James lifted his head, meeting the elder's gaze. "I will protect it," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I will carry these stories, these voices, and ensure they are never forgotten and never misused." The elder nodded solemnly. "Then the cave accepts you. But remember, protection is not passive. It demands vigilance, honesty, and sacrifice. The secrets you have seen will follow you, and you will be tested again and again. James felt a strange sense of calm begin to replace the fear. He had made his choice, and the cave had acknowledged it. Yet the soft murmur of voices in the shadows reminded him that the journey was far from over. The next chamber promised lessons, challenges, and revelations that would push him beyond courage into the very essence of responsibility. James rose from the stone dais, the weight of the box in his hands heavier than any object he had ever carried. The cave seemed to hum around him, the walls vibrating softly, as if acknowledging his choice, and silently warning that the real trial had only begun. The elder's eyes met his, steady and unyielding. The cave tests not knowledge, but integrity. It is not enough to carry secrets. You must live by them. A narrow passage opened to his left, darker and colder than the rest of the cave. From within came the faint sound of running water, punctuated by distant, echoing footsteps that seemed almost like whispers of the past. James knew instinctively that this was the next stage, the first active trial. He swallowed hard and stepped forward, torch flickering in his trembling hand. The chamber beyond was wide, circular, and eerily silent. Its walls were lined with niches holding small clay figures, each representing someone whose life had been altered or destroyed by those above ground, their stories carefully preserved. At the center, a pool of water reflected the torchlight in distorted ripples. On the surface floated a single small reed, inscribed with symbols he did not recognize. The elder's voice broke the silence. This is the test. You will face temptation and fear. The cave presents an opportunity to betray or honor what you have seen. Choose wrongly, and the consequences will follow you outside these walls. James's heart pounded. His mind raced with possibilities. Could he use the knowledge for personal gain? Could he attempt to impress or intimidate the world above? The cave seemed to weigh each thought, each impulse, making him aware that even the smallest misstep could corrupt the very trust the cave had placed in him. A subtle whisper rose from the water, almost coaxing him. Show the world. Claim the secrets. Gain power. Forget the lessons. James recoiled instinctively, realizing the cave could manifest not only memory, but temptation. It tested his heart as surely as it revealed the past. He clenched the glowing box tightly and turned to the elder. I will not betray it, he said, voice trembling but firm. I will honor what I have seen. I will not let greed, pride, or fear override the responsibility I carry. The elder's expression softened slightly, and the shadows seemed to ease. Integrity is proven not by words, but by action, he said. The cave sees intent, and the heart is measured by how it resists temptation. You have taken the first step. James let out a deep breath, feeling the cave's pressure lighten just enough for him to move forward. He realized that the trials would not stop here. Each chamber, each secret, would push him further, forcing him to reconcile his past, his family, and the world above with the truths he now carried. Yet in that moment, he felt a flicker of hope, that perhaps courage and conscience could endure even when the weight of centuries pressed upon him. From the far end of the chamber, a faint golden light began to glow, beckoning him toward the next revelation. The cave had accepted his first act of integrity, but he knew the deeper tests and the most unsettling secrets still lay ahead. James stepped toward the faint golden glow at the far end of the chamber, his hands still gripping the box like a lifeline. The light grew stronger with each step, revealing a tall, polished surface, a mirror unlike any he had seen. It was framed with carved stone, etched with symbols that seemed to pulse faintly, almost breathing. As James approached, he felt the temperature drop and a strange magnetic pull in his chest, as if the cave itself were drawing him closer. The elder's voice came softly behind him. This mirror does not show what is or what was. It shows what could be. The power that comes from knowledge, the dangers of wielding what you have discovered. The cave tests your ability to resist temptation, for power is seductive, and those who seek it for the wrong reasons become lost. James gazed into the mirror. At first he saw only his reflection, a young man in torn clothing, tired but determined. Then the image shifted. He saw himself standing in the plantations above, holding the secrets of the cave, commanding respect and fear, wealth and influence. But alongside that power came corruption, arrogance, and moral decay, a path that could destroy him and those around him if he succumbed to ambition. A whisper rose from the mirror itself, seductive and compelling. You could change the world. You could claim what others have hidden. Take it. Use it. No one will know. No one can stop you. James recoiled. Every instinct in his body screamed both fear and temptation. This was what the cave had warned him about. The ability to exploit the knowledge for personal gain, to manipulate the world above, and to forget the responsibility that came with seeing the truth. His hands tightened around the glowing box, the weight of history and conscience pressing down on him. The elder stepped closer. The power you see is real, but it is not yours to wield for selfish ends. To walk away corrupted is to betray not only the cave but the voices, the lives, and the memory it protects. You must decide. Does ambition blind you, or do you serve the greater truth? James felt the weight of centuries in that moment, the faces of those he had seen in the previous chambers flashing before him, the effigies, the whispers of the buried, the rituals of remembrance. He understood that true power was not in control or domination, but in humility, integrity, and the preservation of what was sacred. With a deep breath, he stepped back from the mirror, refusing to be seduced. I will not use this knowledge for power, he said, voice firm, echoing slightly in the cavern. I will honor the cave, the lives it protects, and the truths I have been shown. That is the responsibility I accept. The mirror shimmered once, then dimmed. The golden glow softened, and the cave exhaled in a way James could feel. A subtle approval, but also a warning. He had passed the first real test of temptation, but he knew the cave's challenges were far from over. From a shadowed corner, the young boy gestured toward another narrow passage. The next secret, he said quietly, will reveal what even the world above fears to acknowledge. James's stomach tightened, a mixture of dread and determination coursing through him. He had resisted power, but the cave promised truths that would shake not just his understanding, but the very foundation of what he thought he knew about justice, legacy, and survival. James followed the narrow passage the boy had indicated, the glow from the previous chamber fading behind him. The cave seemed almost alive, the walls pulsating faintly, as though aware of each footstep he took. The air grew warmer here, heavy with the scent of earth and smoke, carrying with it an almost oppressive sense of expectation. He realized that he was no longer just a visitor. He was part of the cave's unfolding story. The passage opened into a chamber, circular and high-ceilinged, walls covered in polished stone that reflected flickering torchlight like liquid. At its center stood a tall, full-length mirror, framed in carved obsidian, darker than any night sky. Unlike the previous mirror, this one did not shimmer with golden temptation. Instead, it radiated a quiet, almost solemn authority. The elder motioned for James to stand before it. This mirror, he said, reveals not what you can do, but who you are. The cave has preserved truths about the world above, about power, greed, and history. Now it asks a more personal question. Who are you beneath what you have inherited? James's breath caught. He stepped closer, his reflection emerging in the obsidian surface. At first it seemed ordinary, a young man, tall, nervous, uncertain. But as he stared, the mirror rippled, and he began to see layers beneath the surface, moments of pride, fear, and unexamined privilege flashing before him. His father's influence, the plantation, the inherited wealth. Each was reflected, magnified, and judged by the silent eyes of the cave. The whisper began softly, almost a sigh. This is who you are, and this is who you could become. James felt a knot form in his stomach. The mirror did not lie, but it did not merely reflect the present. It showed the consequences of action and inaction, of choice and indifference. Faces appeared in the reflection, the enslaved, the oppressed, the defiant ancestors who had fought to preserve their stories. Their eyes were patient but piercing, asking whether he would acknowledge them fully or turn away, blinded by inherited privilege. The young boy stepped beside him. "It is not enough to see," he said. "You must understand, and you must decide what kind of man you will be when you leave." James clenched his fists, realizing the cave's demand. He could no longer separate himself from the world above. His identity, his family, his wealth, his social standing was intertwined with the injustices the cave had revealed. To ignore it would be to perpetuate it. To act recklessly could destroy what little trust the cave had granted him. He inhaled deeply and faced the reflection squarely. "I am no longer blind," he whispered. "I will not allow history to be forgotten. I will carry its lessons with me. I will not let my privilege define my choices anymore." The obsidian surface shimmered faintly, as if acknowledging his resolve. The elder nodded, stepping back. Understanding oneself is the greatest trial. It is easier to face the past than to confront who you are in light of it. You have begun that journey. From the far end of the chamber, a faint ripple of golden light appeared again, illuminating a path deeper into the cave. James felt a mixture of fear and determination. He knew that the next secret would challenge not only his understanding, but the very way he saw his place in the world. The cave, patient and eternal, seemed to exhale. His journey of reckoning had only just begun. James stepped cautiously toward the glowing path that stretched beyond the obsidian mirror. The air grew dense, almost tangible, carrying the faint scent of ash and wild herbs. Each breath felt heavy with anticipation, as though the cave itself had prepared this final chamber for a reckoning unlike any he had faced before. The passage opened into a wide hall carved deep into the earth, its ceiling rising high above, adorned with thousands of small carvings, faces, hands and tools, symbols of survival and resistance. A faint golden light illuminated a series of stone pedestals arranged in a semicircle. On each pedestal lay an object: a feather, a carved stone, a bundle of herbs, and at the center, a small, intricately designed chest. The elder spoke quietly. "This is the Chamber of Legacy. Here the cave preserves the sacrifices of those who came before. It is one thing to know their stories. It is another to understand the weight they bore and the choices they made to preserve the truth for generations to come." James approached the central chest, noticing the delicate carvings on its lid, depictions of families, struggle and resistance intertwined. As he lifted it, the chest emitted a faint warmth, and inside he saw items that seemed simple at first glance, fragments of cloth, tools, and small figurines, yet each bore a story, a testament to resilience and deliberate sacrifice. The whispers began again, soft and overlapping. "We gave all to preserve memory, to prevent erasure, to teach the future." James could feel the weight of centuries pressing against him, a gravity that demanded not just understanding, but reverence. The young boy's voice echoed softly in the chamber. "Sacrifice is not only what is given, but what is endured. These lives endured so that their truths would survive. That is the legacy the cave entrusts to you." James's hands trembled as he held a small bundle, realizing that these objects were more than relics. They were tangible proof that the Cherokee had consciously chosen to preserve knowledge at great personal cost. Some lives were risked, some families torn apart. Every item was a testament to courage and foresight. The cave had protected these legacies for centuries, ensuring that no outsider could erase them. "I see it now," James whispered. "They did this so their stories would not vanish, so the truth would survive, even when the world above denied it." The elder nodded, shadows dancing across his face. "And now the responsibility passes to you. To honor the sacrifices is to carry them forward without corruption, without exploitation. The cave tests whether those who witness its secrets will preserve or destroy what has been entrusted." James felt a wave of humility unlike any he had known. He understood that knowledge alone was not enough. Respect, vigilance, and moral courage were equally required. To leave the cave was not simply to return to the world above, it was to carry a living legacy, to act in ways that would honor centuries of sacrifice and wisdom. A faint hum rose from the stone walls, resonating like a heartbeat through the chamber. The glow intensified toward a narrow passage at the far end, promising the final revelations of the cave. The truths that would cement James's transformation and test everything he thought he knew about justice, memory, and responsibility. He drew a deep breath, lifting the chest carefully, ready to continue. The cave had guided him through reflection, temptation, and identity. Now, it demanded one last confrontation, the reckoning of truth itself. James followed the faint golden glow down the narrow passage at the far end of the Chamber of Legacy. His hands still gripped the small chest, the weight of its contents pressing on him like centuries of responsibility. The cave seemed to breathe around him, the air vibrating with quiet anticipation. Every step forward felt like crossing a threshold between the known world and something beyond comprehension. The passage opened into a vast chamber, walls carved with murals unlike any he had seen. They were alive with color, shadows, and subtle motion, depictions of people, animals, forests, rivers, and cities, all intertwined in a vast story. At the center of the room stood a stone altar, radiating a soft light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. On the altar lay a single scroll, bound with sinew and marked with symbols that glowed faintly in the golden light. The elder spoke softly, almost reverently. "This is the culmination, the heart of the cave's purpose. Everything you have seen, felt, and learned leads to this moment. The scroll contains the ultimate revelation, a map of memory, wisdom, and foresight. It shows how the Cherokee preserved their truth, even when the world sought to destroy it." James stepped closer, feeling a mixture of awe and dread. The scroll was fragile, yet it emanated power and clarity, as though holding the collective insight of generations. Carefully, he unrolled it. The script was intricate, almost alive, recounting not only history, but philosophy, moral guidance, and the deliberate strategies used to protect knowledge. Every line was a reminder of foresight, courage, and ethical responsibility, a blueprint for sustaining truth even under oppression. He realized then that the cave had not merely been a repository of secrets, it was a living teacher, a guardian of lessons meant to endure. Every chamber, every artifact, every wisp had prepared him for this moment, to see that history was not inert, but alive, and that every action, choice, and legacy mattered. The young boy stepped forward. "You now understand," he said softly. "The cave does not simply hide. It teaches, it preserves, and it tests. It has shown you history, morality, temptation, and identity. The scroll is the synthesis of all that has been entrusted to you. To leave it behind would be to forget, and to take it without respect would be to betray everything." James traced the symbols with his fingertips, feeling the weight of responsibility press into his soul. He understood now that the cave demanded more than awareness. It demanded stewardship, courage, and humility. The knowledge he carried could reshape his life, and perhaps even the world above, if he honored it properly. The elder's voice echoed through the chamber. "This is the ultimate revelation, that knowledge without conscience is dangerous, that memory without action is incomplete, and that legacy is preserved not through possession, but through respect and responsibility. The cave has judged you worthy to bear it, but the true test begins when you return to the world above." James bowed his head, a mix of reverence and determination filling him. The cave had stripped away ignorance, pride, and fear, leaving only clarity. He understood that the final lesson was not in the secrets themselves, but in how he would carry them, honor them, and act upon them. From the shadows, the golden glow beckoned once more, leading toward the exit. James took a deep breath, ready to step into the world above, a man forever changed by what the Cherokee had preserved and by what he had learned in the sacred caves. James emerged from the final chamber into the narrow exit tunnel, the golden light of the cave fading behind him. The air grew fresher, warmer, almost shocking in contrast to the dense, ancient atmosphere he had left. Outside, the sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Every rustle of leaves, every chirp of a distant bird felt magnified, as though the world itself had waited for his return. The elder and the young boy followed silently. "The cave's test does not end here," the elder said quietly. It continues in the world above. How you act with what you have seen, that is the true measure of your worth. James's mind was a whirl. He remembered the obsidian mirrors, the voices of the buried, the ritual chambers, and the scroll. Each revelation had shaped him, challenged him, and forced him to confront truths he could no longer ignore. The world above had always seemed simple, controllable, even just. Now, every assumption felt fragile, every action potentially consequential. As he stepped into the sunlight, James was struck by the contrast. Plantation lands stretched before him, fields cultivated, houses standing proudly. Yet in his mind, the echoes of those who had been silenced hovered like shadows across the terrain. The cave had shown him the hidden history of this land, and now it demanded a reckoning. He could see almost palpably the injustices that had been committed, the stories erased, and the courage that had resisted erasure. The young boy's voice broke the heavy silence. The cave entrusted you with memory. Do not let it be wasted. Truth unacknowledged becomes betrayal. You now carry the responsibility to act with integrity. James nodded slowly, the weight of the box in his arms and the cave's teachings pressing on him. He understood that the challenge ahead would not be dramatic or cinematic. It would be daily, quiet, and relentless. He would have to honor the past, confront the present, and act in ways that preserved the dignity and stories he had witnessed. The elder's eyes softened. The world above is not the cave. It is unpredictable, often cruel, but also capable of change. What you do with the cave's secrets, how you honor them, will determine whether the legacy of those who sacrificed is preserved or forgotten. James took a deep breath, feeling the forest breeze on his face, and looked toward the distant fields. The weight of history and memory was heavy, but it was also empowering. He had been transformed, challenged, and tested. Now he carried the voices, the lessons, and the responsibility of generations who had endured so much to protect truth. With one final glance back at the entrance of the sacred caves, James began his journey across the land above. Every step was measured, thoughtful, and deliberate. He had seen the depths of memory and morality. He had faced temptation, identity, and legacy. And now, the world outside awaited his choices, a world that could no longer remain ignorant of the truths he carried. The cave behind him faded into shadow, but its presence lingered in his mind, a constant reminder that he was never truly alone and that history demanded acknowledgement and action, no matter how challenging. James walked steadily through the fields, the sun now low in the sky, painting the land in shades of gold and crimson. The box from the cave rested securely in his arms, but its weight was nothing compared to the weight in his heart, the responsibility, the clarity, and the unshakable presence of centuries of history whispering in his mind. He remembered every chamber, the obsidian mirrors reflecting his intentions, the voices of the buried, the rituals of preservation, the lessons of identity, and the scroll that carried the ultimate revelation. Each had challenged him, stripped away ignorance, and forced him to reckon with the world above in a way he had never anticipated. The cave had transformed him, and now the world awaited his action. Passing the familiar plantation lands, James felt the tension of contrast sharply. Here were the structures, cultivated and orderly, yet beneath them lay untold stories of struggle, courage, and resistance, stories preserved in the sacred caves but silenced outside. The legacy of the Cherokee was not hidden for secrecy's sake, but to survive, to endure beyond oppression, and he now bore that legacy forward. The young boy appeared silently beside him, a quiet reminder of the trust placed upon James. "You carry more than artifacts," he said softly. "You carry responsibility, memory, and the promise of truth. The cave chose you, not to punish or reward, but to ensure the voices are honored." James looked down at the box, then to the horizon. He understood that revelation alone was not enough. It would not undo centuries of injustice, nor erase the pain inflicted. But it could guide action, inspire respect, and honor the courage of those who had fought to preserve knowledge when the world above would not. "I understand," he whispered. "I will honor them. I will not let their sacrifice be forgotten. I will carry their truths into the world, and I will act with integrity, humility, and courage." The elder's voice echoed faintly in his memory, as if carried on the wind. "The true power of knowledge lies in responsibility, not possession. You are now part of the living legacy." As the shadows lengthened across the fields, James felt a shift within himself, a calm, steady resolve replacing the fear and uncertainty that had plagued him in the caves. The lessons, the trials, and the revelations had shaped him into someone who could witness, act, and preserve. The weight of the past had been transformed into a promise for the future. He continued walking, each step purposeful, carrying the echoes of the sacred caves with him. The whispers of the ancestors, the visions of resilience, and the lessons of integrity were now inseparable from him. The world above, with all its challenges, awaited, and James was ready. Not as a man who merely knew history, but as a guardian of memory, a steward of truth, and a witness to the courage that the world above had tried to bury. And as the first stars began to appear in the twilight sky, a quiet sense of hope rose within him. The caves had tested him, revealed the unvarnished truth, and entrusted him with a responsibility far greater than knowledge alone. James stepped forward into the night, ready to fulfill that promise, forever changed by what he had seen, heard, and learned, and determined that the world above would not forget.